sponsors: Definitive Logic, Deloitte, Segway Technologies, FTI, Array, Cloud Lake, DDC IT Services, MacaLogic, and PE Systems. Again, a special thank you to these companies. Without them, we'd not be able to provide STEM scholarships and educational materials for our future use. We have some upcoming events this fall. So we have, or from here on out to the fall, I guess I should say. Our monthly luncheon scheduled July 15th is TBD. We have an August 19th luncheon featuring Mr. Dennis D'Angelo, SES Executive Director of Air Force Space Center. Emerging Leader Volunteer Opportunity is September 1st at One Bistro. And all of these activities are out on our portal, so you can register for them in the portal. Next is our annual Daniel Curtis Memorial Golf Outing scheduled for September 13th at Beaver Creek Golf Club, in conjunction with our casino night happening September 14th at the UD Marriott from 6 to 11 p.m. And the Wright IT Summit, we're now naming WITS, is scheduled for September 14th through the 15th at the UD Marriott. So lots of fun things coming. You can see all of those in the portal, and I highly suggest that you register for those events, and we'll see you there. Next, I'd like to hand it over to Yvonne Vermillion, Chapter President, to highlight one of our newest features on our website.
Thanks, Jenny. I just wanted to highlight a new feature on our Dayton-Wright AFCEA website today. Under our Events tab, we have added a section called Past Events, where slides from our previous speakers are saved. There's also a link to our Dayton-Wright AFCEA Chapter YouTube channel. Next slide, Joni. On our YouTube channel, we have previous recordings of all of our virtual events, to include the Wright IT Summit and all the vignettes from the summit, as well as our luncheon speakers. So I hope you'll go visit there, check it out, and hit the subscribe button at the top right page so you can be aware of future postings. Thanks, Joni.
Thanks, Yvonne. Next up is David Hart, Regional Vice President, for more exciting updates. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Joni. Hello, everyone. Want to start providing more updates for everyone, what AFCEA is doing around the country and also regionally. Some of you may not be aware that AFCEA is the largest professional association for the defense industry in the world. There's 150 chapters internationally. As Regional Vice President, I cover the Midwest, which is pretty much Ohio and all the states that border Ohio. One of our major conferences that AFCEA International is organizing is the AFCEA West conference. Is coming up next week. It's a rather large conference, and it focuses on the Navy. I have some links in here that are included in the slides. Joni, next slide. We also, in our region, we have other chapters. There's a new chapter standing up in Indiana that covers the state of Indiana. They are seeking new members. Really neat. They had their first event on Monday in Indianapolis, and if you've seen the movie 12 Strong, about the Special Forces footprint right after 9/11 that was deployed to Afghanistan, it's a great movie. They had two of the horse soldiers there. That was their main mode of transportation for the A teams, was getting around on horseback. And I would also like to introduce you to these other chapter leaders, and I've asked the chapter president, the incoming chapter president for the new chapter, Jeremy Miller, if he would jump on and say hi to folks. Are you on, Jeremy? Okay, so am
I on?
Oh, okay, cool. Hey, Jeremy, thanks for jumping on, brother.
I think I'm on now. I didn't know how to unmute myself. I'm on my phone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I do. You want to say hi to everyone?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm here in Indianapolis. I appreciate you having me on, David, and it's great to be a part of such a great organization, and we're looking for some good things happening here in the Indiana area. So thanks again. Yep.
And so the agencies that you'll find in Indiana, DFAS has a big footprint, Navy Crane, and there's some other facilities. Next slide, please, Joni. Also, you may or may not know this. There's a chapter that supports Fort Knox, the Gold Vault chapter. There's a big footprint there, the Human Resource Command. They have a meet and greet that's coming up on June 23rd. It's at the Sam Adams Brew House on Fort Knox. And I've also invited their chapter president to jump on and say hi, Dominic Ledbetter. Dom, you want to say hi to folks?
Hey, how you guys doing? My name is Dominic Ledbetter. I'm the incoming president for the AFCEA Gold Vault chapter here in the Fort Knox, Kentucky area. And despite the pandemic, we are pretty much active. We're having the meet and greet with the contractors to try to build up our membership. And also we are in the process of reviewing 9 applicants to award some scholarships for the STEMS program that we have going. The next month, our VP of operations, our VP of women in AFCEA is having a luncheon, and we have a guest speaker that's a retired Lieutenant Colonel Terry Owens, and then my VP of program, she's busy as well, putting together a golf scramble on the 18th of September. So if there's anyone that's on the line that's in the Fort Knox area, please reach out to me, because we can definitely use volunteers to assist with a couple of vacancies that we have. My email address is there, and if you got a pencil, piece of paper, I'll give you my personal phone number as well. It's 314-456-3876. So by all means, definitely reach out to us.
Dominic, if you want to throw that in the chat on the Teams link, we can also we'll push that out. So folks, I'll leave you with this thought. You know, we have chapters all over the country. We have some here regionally, and we'll be looking for intersection points at these government and military leaders where we have common ground and can find some opportunities to cross-pollinate between the Army and the Navy and other agencies in the Air Force. So, Joni, that's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I want to introduce our speaker. Lieutenant General Shaun Morris is the commander of AFCEA Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. The center is responsible for total lifecycle management for aircraft engines, munitions, electronic, computer, network, cyber, and agile combat support systems. The center employs more than 28,000 people and has a budget of approximately $258 billion. The general also serves as the Program Executive Office for the Rapid Sustainment Office, organized under AFCEA, and is responsible for finding ways to save money and improve efficiencies in the sustainment of aircraft and other weapon systems throughout the Air Force fleet. The RSO focus areas include robotics and automation, advanced manufacturing, and condition-based maintenance plus. Lieutenant General Morris was commissioned through the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1988. He has held a number of key acquisition and sustainment positions on Air Force Space and Weapon Systems, staff positions on the Air and Joint Staff, and commander positions at the squadron, group, wing, and center levels. He commanded the Defense Contract Management Agency in Kuwait City and had served as Air Force Program Executive Office for Weapons and Director of the Armament Director at Air Force Lifecycle Management Center, Eglin Air Force Base. Prior to assuming his current position, Lieutenant General Morris was commander of Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center, Kirkland Air Force Base, New Mexico. With that, I will hand it over to you, Lieutenant General Shaun Morris.
Hey, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now.
Great. Okay. All right. So first, my apologies that we weren't able to work the technology to get me on anything other than the phone. It's only slightly embarrassing since I think the team that works for me actually does some of this technology. So we'll I'm sure get all that sorted out. I appreciate the introduction. I am anxious, honestly, to kind of do a Q&A and talk about what you're interested in. But let me give a couple quick, maybe precursor comments, and then we'll open it up to questions, because again, I'm really interested in what you're interested in. You provided a great description of what we do at Air Force Lifecycle Management Center. Maybe more simplistically, I would think of it this way. when I was the commander at the Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center, we were responsible for the Air Force's nuclear acquisition programs. My good friend, and many of you know him, General J.T. Thompson, who was the commander at the Air Force Life Cycle Management Center 2 commanders ago, now is the commander out at Space and Missile Systems Center, is responsible for all of our space acquisition. Other than those 2, Air Force Life Cycle Management Center does all of the rest of the Air Force's acquisition. So if it isn't space and it isn't nuclear, we're responsible for it. And we do that with almost 30,000 people spread across the country, predominantly headquartered here out of Wright-Patterson. We have 2 installations that fall under our direct control, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and Hanscom Air Force Base up in Boston. We also have a large footprint and presence down at Eglin doing weapons, and at the former logistics centers, now logistics complexes at Robbins, Tinker, and Hill. We have a few other places. We provided some charts. They're available to you. I don't plan on spending a lot of time on the charts, but that's just a sense for the breadth of what Air Force Life Cycle Management Center does. And as was highlighted in the intro, I'm also dual-hatted as the Program Executive Officer for the Rapid Sustainment Office. So I'm happy to talk about some of the things we're doing in the Rapid Sustainment Office if you're interested in that. I will offer maybe just a little context, and if you have the charts, I think it's the 3rd chart. One of the things that I always find interesting when you take over a new organization, usually before you've had a chance to sit down, everybody wants to understand what your priorities are and all the things that you're going to change. And so I did spend a little bit of time after I got here trying to think my way through from the perspective of what is happening in the world, what was happening related to everything that was going on with the pandemic, what is happening with the pivot in our national defense strategy away from low-end conflict up to high-end conflict. What are the implications of those kind of on the strategic goals and the strategic planning activity for Air Force Life Cycle Management Center? And when I did that, I went through a little bit of a who, what, where, when kind of construct in my mind to think about what things are staying the same and what things are changing. And in the area of what things are changing, what do we need to do? And so let me maybe just walk you through a few of those things just so you kind of understand what our focus areas here are in Air Force Life Cycle Management Center. And then I am going to open it up for questions. And so when I went through that thought process, when I get to a question like why, right, our why isn't really changing. We deliver war-winning capabilities to the Air Force. That has always been our why at Air Force Life Cycle Management Center, to ensure that our warfighters have material and capabilities that exceeds those of anybody else in the world. And so that isn't really an area that I viewed as changing. The when, many of you have probably heard Chief Brown has put out a document called Accelerate, Change, or Lose that is really focused on the fact that we need to move faster. I will be quite honest to you, I have yet to be in a job where somebody wasn't asking me to move faster. And General Goldfein, before General Brown, wasn't exactly asking us to go slow either. So I didn't actually see the when of this as changing. We have got to move faster than our adversaries, and that's pretty simple. But there are a few areas that clearly are changing, and that we have to think about a little bit differently. And some of those are pandemic related, and some of them aren't. And so when you see the chart, what you'll see is we've broken our focus areas really into 3 categories that we refer to as who, where, and how. And let me maybe work back through those in reverse order. So the how, as a center priority, is really focused on our digital pivot and our transition to digital acquisition and digital engineering. And so if you're familiar with our prior service acquisition executive, Dr. Roper would often talk about the digital trinity. And by the digital trinity, he referred about the incredible power inside of our acquisition programs that come when you can combine digital engineering, model-based systems engineering with agile software development and modular open system architecture. And when you can combine those three things together, what you end up with is a weapon system that is highly responsive to being able to rapidly change to incorporate new technology, is highly sustainable, and allows you to spiraling capability at a pace that you need to compete with a high-end adversary like China. And so we are incredibly focused inside of Air Force Lifecycle Management Center on how we make this pivot into the digital acquisition arena. And we're partnered with Air Force Materiel Command, who is my parent organization. The director for acquisition in the Pentagon, currently acting as Ms. Costello, who are running a digital campaign on how we move the Air Force in this direction. And so we're working that within Air Force Lifecycle Management Center to think about how do we do acquisition differently in a way that allows us to be far more responsive and have far greater insight into our programs as we move forward. So that's kind of our big focus on the how we do business. And this is not an insignificant change as we think about what does digital acquisition really mean? When we think about from a workforce composition, do we have the right type of talent and the right types of skills inside of our organization to be successful in that? Right, we begin to get into things like artificial intelligence and machine learning. It becomes very data-centric, so data management becomes a key function. And so there are some new areas that we now have to think about. Where do we go get and compete for the talent that's in those spaces that is very different than the traditional talent that we've had. The next one is that we've been thinking about is where. And this is one that traditionally would not be on the list, right? When you think about where you do your work from. If you go back pre-pandemic, we had a facility strategy that was very much focused on how do I just get more people into a very constrained space. And a lot of that strategy was associated with going and leasing new facilities to get more space, but generally was still very much focused on the base inside of our facilities in a very traditional working model. The pandemic has completely changed how we think about where people do their work from. We have gone for now the last 18 months to a posture where we are working almost 100% telework outside of the base. And so now what we have been working through is how do we get from our pre-pandemic posture, which was very base-centric in the office, everybody working together, through our pandemic posture, which has been completely disaggregated, everybody working remotely, to what we think the right mix of those things in some type of hybrid structure is going to be going into the future. And how do we leverage that then in terms of where people are working now to go backwards into our facility strategy on what that means in terms of what our facilities now need to look at. Like, how do I take advantage of concepts like hoteling to be able to potentially free up space in my facilities to be able to do the type of work I can only do on base, highly classified work, classified work. How do I change and update my facilities to facilitate that kind of work and continue to take advantage of the ability to do off-site work off-site in a telework environment? And so our thinking about that has been very much mission-focused. It starts with a mission, but we are trying to balance that where that mission is supportive of telework, balance that against people's desires with regards to telework. And I'm sure you're experiencing this in a similar way we are. As we look at that, we get a pretty good bell curve of interest in telework. We have people on one extreme who, if they never see their home office again, will be thrilled. On the other end of the extreme, we have people who clearly never ever want to come back onto the base again. And if they can always work from their house, they will be happy. And then we have the majority of people that are somewhere in the middle. They found the value of teleworking. They value some of that, but they also miss the camaraderie. And there are some things in a teleworking environment that are challenging to do for new people in an organization, for trainees, that we're trying to balance how we continue to not lose our cultural, the culture of our organization, the parts of that come from our ability to collaborate in maybe a different way than just happens if you're all remote. And so this is a huge pivot for us. A huge enabler to that then is our IT infrastructure. And so I joked earlier about not being able to get on this call, but this is a perfect example. If you are going to have a hybrid workplace with online collaboration, you have to have reliable collaboration tools that everybody can use that enable you to be able to do this in an effective way. It was one of the reasons pre-pandemic that we were not heavy users of telework. The reality was our IT infrastructure as a department was not sufficient. I often tell the story. I got to the point, honestly, when I traveled, I didn't even bother taking my laptop. It was just a rock because I could never get connected as I went around in a way that enabled me to actually be successful. We've made tremendous investments in these spaces through the pandemic that have enabled us to operate in a much more effective way remotely than we ever have before. But we have to continue to make those investments and update those capabilities if we're going to be able to leverage this going into the future. And then the third ties back into a little bit of what I talked about in the how, which is then the who, right? Which is what does the workforce that we need in 2030 look like in order to be able to successfully operate in these kind of environments, working these kind of programs. And that's a workforce mix discussion. What are the skills that we need? It's a workforce composition discussion that begins to bring in things like diversity and inclusion. It's a workforce location discussion. We have traditionally hired predominantly around our bases for people who wanted to work at those locations. The application of some of these other ideas now lets me potentially go recruit and retain people at non-traditional locations. And so maybe that allows me to bring in some non-traditional talent into our workspaces that we haven't been able to really take advantage of before because those people were not at locations that would make working for us appealing to them. So those three things together, and I think you can see they all begin to kind of link together, are our big strategic initiatives that we're working in Air Force Lifecycle Management Center. And I think most of you probably know, right, as the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center commander, I have predominantly for this workforce the organize, train, and equip responsibilities, whereas the actual program execution is managed by the program executive officers in the various different areas. And so the majority of that acquisition authority doesn't flow through me, but the organize, train, and equip responsibilities do. The one exception being to that, the Rapid Sustainment Office, for which I'm dual-hatted the program executive officer. And its mission is very much tied into this, which is how do I incorporate and bring in new technology in a way to really get after one of my biggest issues as an Air Force, which is how do I drive down sustainment costs, and particularly how do I drive down sustainment costs in a way that allows me to repurpose money back into new capabilities that I have to have as I think about now not fighting in Afghanistan, but potentially building a force that can counter China. So with that, I'm going to take a breath, and I'm going to open it up because I would love to see what if any questions you all have, and I'm happy to answer anything you'd like to talk about.
Great. If anyone has a question, feel free to raise your hand or unmute your mic. Robert.
Yes, sir. Talking about the rapid acquisition and the agile software development that's being pushed in the Air Force, is there a central location for someone to go to really get up to speed on what resources are available, the working groups that exist, and training and everything that might possibly be available?
Okay, your question had to do with the Rapid Sustainment Office?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so absolutely. So the Rapid Sustainment, are you here local in the Dayton area? I'm sorry, are you here local in the Dayton area?
Yes, he is.
Okay, thank you. So if you're local here in the Dayton area, the answer is really easy. The Rapid Sustainment Office opened a brand new facility that we operate of that actually happens to be in the green. And it's in partnership with University of Dayton Research Institute. We're actually partnered with them on these activities. The facility is actually managed by them, but they house our team there. My deputy program executive officer is Mr. Nathan Parker, and his working deputy is Colonel Nicole Ruff-Lehman, and they would be happy to host you if you have questions or would like to engage on that. You could reach out to them. You can do that through our staff here. We can get you in contact with them, and I'm sure they'd be happy to put something together to bring you in to show you all the different things that they're working on.
Great, thank you for the question, Robert. Anyone else have another question?
Yes, I have a question around innovation. Sir, my name is Doug Roberts. I'm with a large IT company, NTT Data. And I really appreciate your comment on innovation and change and so forth. But, a suggestion or maybe rhetorical comment is, until innovation is part of evaluation criteria, oftentimes there's not the impact that there could be, particularly around acquisitions. And so, that's something that, we've been trying to have some particular discussions with different organizations around, but, really putting meat to the bones of tying that into evaluation criteria on procurements, to get more innovation.
Okay, I think I understand your point. I would offer to you perhaps a couple different things and maybe some places that would be good for you to engage. So a lot of people on this line may be very familiar that we've kind of changed how we do small business innovative research, which was an area that we used to do this in. And a lot of that, especially the initial screening of projects inside of that now is done by AFWorks, which AFWorks falls under the Air Force Research Lab and Major General Pringle. But AFWorks is run by Colonel Nate Diller. AFWorks is now really our central entry point for a lot of innovation inside the Air Force. And then we kind of grow from what they do initially as those things go through the various different phases, to get closer and closer to actually incorporation into our weapon systems. That begins to shift from AFWorks as an entry point into the programs. And so I would offer to you that this is a great discussion to have with the AFWorks team, how we value innovation inside of solicitations. It is when you get to a major weapon system acquisition, right, with a very defined set of requirements. And at that, we've gone through all of these discussions up to that point, and honestly, as an Air Force, we're ready to go buy something, and we know what that something is for the most part. That's probably not the place that you're really going to see, right, a big wild card on innovation, right, where we're going to be taking big swings at that point over, you know, you have half a plan, you know, but you plan to innovate the rest.
No, I understand, sir. And
this needs to happen much earlier. And that's why I say I think I would really recommend, if you haven't talked to AFWERX, if you're not familiar with AFWERX, well, they would be great to bring into this forum, honestly, if you haven't already brought them in, to talk about what they're doing, how we're incorporating innovation in the Air Force, how industry can participate in that, and how we address questions like you just raised, because it is a really good question on how we incentivize, reward, and evaluate innovation inside of our solicitations.
Yeah, and I probably should have framed my question a little better. I meant it more in the IT arena. You know, some of the topics like the focus areas of you know, RPA, robotics, you know, et cetera, you know, more in that, not necessarily weapons programs. But I appreciate your comments, sir.
Great, thank you, Doug, for the question. Anyone else have a question? General Morris, with your comment of moving faster than our adversaries, with the pace of acquisition, how are you ensuring you're moving faster within that acquisition, but safely through that acquisition when you determine the end goal?
Yeah, great question. So, you're probably aware, because Lifecycle Management Center has been around since 2012, when the Material Command went through a pretty significant reorganization in the 2012 timeframe. General C.D. Moore was the first commander here, and one of the things he set out was some what I would say are you know, guiding principles for the center, and I think he was very wise at that time, and one of those guiding principles was speed with discipline, right? Which gets to exactly your question, right? How do we move faster, but ensure that in the end that the capability we're delivering is relevant and usable by our warfighters in a way that makes sense. And so there have been a number of things that we've done in this area. One of those, again, hopefully with this group, most of you are familiar with mid-tier acquisition and the new authorities that we gained to allow us to do rapid prototyping and rapid fielding. So this was I think a really great addition to our potential acquisition strategy toolbox that allows you, where you have the opportunity to prototype quickly with multiple competitors, where you more or less understand what it is that you want, to be able to bring in, get those prototypes quickly, be able to go out and actually evaluate them, and then based on those prototype evaluations, then make a rapid fielding decision for the best capability that fits your needs. You know, Vice, our old traditional way, which is I go run a competition, I down select to one person, and then I really, really hope that they deliver on what they said they were going to, even though I'm probably not going to know whether they did or not for 10 years, right? That model just doesn't always work for things that we need sooner. And so the mid-tier acquisition authorities have been helpful in just providing some different ways to go about doing some of these things. I will also tie it back to the digital acquisition pivot. One of the benefits of digital acquisition model-based systems engineering is it allows us to get far greater insight into a weapon systems design earlier. So when I was the program executive officer at the Nuclear Weapons Center, ground-based strategic deterrent was one of the systems that was inside my portfolio. We were heavily invested in digital acquisition. I would offer to you in the early development phase, because of what we were doing with modeling, we were on design iteration 12 of the weapon system, whereas traditionally, by the time we got to a PDR level, we might have gone through 1, 2, maybe if we were really moving fast, 3 design iterations. So the incorporation of some of these tools also allows us to move through these design iterations much more quickly than we did before. And the key in the end is, right, how do you ensure through that activity that the models are actually what you're generating out of the models is valid capability. And so how you now think about tests differently also applies. How do you get earlier insight to validate those models? So you ensure yourself that those capabilities that you think you're getting are actually what you're going to get are important aspects of this as well. So we have some new authorities that are allowing us to do that. We have some new tools that are allowing us to do that. And we're trying to pivot as quickly as we can, because we know the reality is China is investing huge in new capabilities, and they are fielding new capabilities at a pace far more robustly than we are. And we have got to be able to get to the point that our systems are more adaptable and more agile and more responsive to the changes and threats, or we're going to find ourselves with an Air Force that's rapidly obsolete.
Question that I've heard that budgets are tight in most of the program offices, large must pays across AFL-CMC. Will the budget picture improve later in the fiscal year?
Well, I think the really short answer to that is probably not. Now, we have a congressional board of directors that gets a vote in that process. So our current budget situation, in this fiscal year, honestly, isn't that bad. From where we were, we haven't seen significant changes in the FY22 budget, and of course that's over on the Hill now, so we'll see what Congress does with it. But generally, the 22 budget was a pretty consistent with what we had in 21. And so we didn't see, there was some concern that we would see some significant shifts in FY22. I think you just have to look around and, we've made a lot of investments nationally to try to address, a lot of concerns with the pandemic. There was some concerns over how that might impact the DoD budget, the 22 DoD budget. It turns out we didn't really see a whole lot of impacts. I think most of us, though, are holding our breath a little bit on FY23 and waiting to see where FY23 is going to go. Generally, if you look at what the Chief of Staff has said, the Chief of Staff has clearly stated from the internal Air Force's perspective, he views the 23 budget as the change budget. It's the one that we are going to go try to get after some of the things he said we need to do to shift from the force we have today to the force that we need 10 years from now. But in the end, again, Congress gets a vote on that. And if you have a lot of what we have talked about is the fact that we need to divest capabilities that are not viable in a high-end fight to be able to make investments into new capabilities that we have to have. if you've been following the Air Force story, we have tried to do that a few other times here in recent years and have been rebuffed by Congress in our attempts to do that. This will be a very interesting year to watch to see what Congress does with that. I personally think the fact that we are coming out of Iraq, the fact that we are coming out of Afghanistan is an opportunity perhaps to have a more robust discussion about what capabilities we need in the China fight versus what capabilities we needed in the Afghanistan fight, and the need to be able to divest some of those lower end capabilities to be able to get to the higher end capabilities is a must. So we'll see where that goes. But right now, budgets are okay from my perspective. I know on any individual program they can be challenged, but projecting forward, I think into 23 will be a real watch item.
Great, thank you. John Jananzo, I don't know if I pronounced your last name correctly. I see you've raised your hand.
Hey, General, one quick question and one longer question. The digital acquisition guide, industry's been looking for it, the engineers, the PMs. Do you know when it's going to be released? I know it's been in approval for some time now, but the digital acquisition guide, that 2021, the updated one from 2018.
I actually thought it was already out.
Okay, we'll go back and double check it.
So I'll check. They've been doing periodic updates to the acquisition guide. Now, maybe what we've been releasing internally is different than what we've been releasing externally. But Ms. Costello just put out some guidance here recently, and I know the digital campaign, I believe, has been putting out pretty recurring updates to the digital acquisition guide. So I'll ask my team as well. But I actually thought we had released that already.
There's an APN website, and I was just on it last week, but I haven't been on it this week. You have to go through there and register and get on it, and then see if it's there. I just had you on the line. I figured maybe you knew if it was recently released. The other question, and this is a little bit longer one. You know, I work with a lot of companies, helping them through the AFMC and Lifecycle Management Center, WICET. And I see a real burnout on AFWERX. All the people we try to work with, and the point of contacts, the program managers and technical points of contact, I sense that there's a real burnout because there's lots and lots of small companies trying to get into the AFWERX queue, and getting the folks to support memorandums of understanding and all the work that it takes to get through the AFWERX wickets, which has grown since it's first started several years ago. It seems like there's a burnout. Are you aware of this? Is there any plan to try to work on this or mitigate it so that it smooth flows a little bit better?
So I haven't heard it put quite that bluntly, but here's what I do know, which is we kind of made a commitment to this process, but I don't know that we resourced it at the level that we needed to. And so there has been a lot of discussion about how do we, if we're kind of committed to this AFWERX model, how do we ensure that we've got adequate resources aligned against it to make sure that it's successful. We've used what I would term as a little bit of a volunteer model, which is a small cadre of folks, and then folks that kind of volunteer their time to come support. I personally don't think that's a very sustainable approach.
I would agree. 100% agree.
Yeah. And so we're working through that as an enterprise now on what the right level of what I would view kind of as full-time resources are that are required to sustain that. And I do think as a department within the Air Force, we've got to match the resources with the expectations. If not, we can generate exactly what you just described.
I might recommend working with AFCEA down at Hobart. They have a TILO, Technology Insertion Liaison Office, and that process I've worked at 3 or 4 times really works. You don't wait longer than about a week to get a hold of them. They give you an audience a lot of times in person, even during the COVID, where they collect the right people who might be interested in the technology, and they make a pretty quick decision. So it's a lot less frustration. You have a single point of contact. The guy organizes it or gal organizes it. You get the right people, and if you got the right buzz, you get the follow-ons. If not, you move on to the next thing. So AFCEA and Hurlburt has a pretty good process you might have you guys look at. Thanks, sir.
Yeah, I think we have. I think you're very familiar that AFCEA also has their own set of authorities and their own money and a very specific mission set. And so they're somewhat uniquely postured to be able to do that in a way that's different than when you start now applying this, what I would say, against big Air Force, which becomes more complex. But your point is very well made, and I'll make sure the next time I talk to General Pringle that I bring this up to her.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, John. Any additional questions? Do you have any closing comments, Lieutenant General Morris?
Well, no, other than just to say, thanks for inviting me to participate. I always appreciate these events. It will be really nice when we get back to doing them in person. So I do look forward to, as we move forward, the opportunity to actually engage with each of you in person and continue to work our way through these partnerships and how we work together to make this enterprise better. Ultimately, we're all trying to accomplish the same thing, right? Which is how we get the absolute best capabilities into the hands of our warfighters, regardless of the perspective that we come at that from. That's ultimately the end goal for all of us. So I appreciate the continued partnership. I appreciate AFCEA, and thanks for everybody's time today.
Thank you for being a part of our 2021 Luncheon series. We're very honored that you came and spoke with us today, and we too hope that very soon our events will be in person. As of right now, our WITS conference is going to be a hybrid event. So if you are excited for those things that are coming in person, we're just as excited as everyone else is to do that. So check out the website for any events that you may want to participate in. And the charts will be available on the portal. So with that, thank you everyone and have a great afternoon.